Hi, this is Wise Wolf with a message to encourage you to consider improving your food reserve storage. Inflation is here causing food and energy prices to rise with no end in sight. In this period of economic uncertainty, eFoods Global is making certain that hunger is no option. For a complete product list, go to booksmart.myefoods.com. Again, that's booksmart.myefoods.com. Try eFoods Global. It's the gold standard of food reserves.
What we gonna do right here is go back. Way back. Back into time.
The professional rating type guy at Standard & Poor's has been assigned to evaluate one of these complex financial derivatives that you've been reading about that cause the biggest losses. And it's a derivative that is backed by subprime home loans. And so he has asked for what's called here the loan tapes. That simply means the loan files that we put on computer tape, so that he can review a sample of the loan files to evaluate their credit risk, because that's what a credit rating agency does, right? So it's a pretty standard request, you might think. This is the response he gets from his boss, and this is a high-level boss at Standard & Poor's, that it is totally unreasonable to ask for the files so that you could evaluate the credit risk if you're going to give a credit risk rating. Right? This is significantly insane at this level, right? But why is it totally unreasonable? Well, the stated reason is that the investors, that means the investment banks that are buying these subprime mortgages, pooling them together and creating these derivatives, don't even have the loan information themselves. In other words, they did zero due diligence before they bought this toxic waste. They're now bringing it to the rating agency, which is going to do how much due diligence? Zero. Because the boss is furious that the professional guy actually wants to look. Now, what rating do you think they're going to end up giving? AAA. What is a AAA rating supposed to mean? Zero credit risk, right? On stuff that has not just a little bit of credit risk, but immense credit risk. Now, how is the guy supposed to find a way to say that something that has immense credit risk has zero credit risk? What's his boss directing him to do? That's right, make it up.
I would argue that the most serious threat to the United States is not someone hiding in a cave in Afghanistan or Pakistan, but our own fiscal irresponsibility. The real problem, Steve, is healthcare cost. Our healthcare problem is much more significant than Social Security.
What do you mean by that?
By that I mean that the Medicare problem is 5 times greater than the Social Security problem.
And the bailout was never about the little guy and never about the subprime mortgage. It was about so much more. And in terms of reform, I absolutely think we need to return to Glass-Steagall. That was a time in 1933 when Wall Street had really wrecked the rest of the economy, where the same types of practices actually that we now know today, the risk, the selling securities based on other little loans that don't have as much value as they say they have, and all of that, that was happening in 1929. It was just with different stuff. And so dividing the landscape really is the only way to bring stability, to really rein in Wall Street, not to ask them if it's okay, but to just go ahead and do it.
That's been a major problem with the markets in terms of how they get moved away from underlying economic reality. Because what you'll often find with the government's numbers is that you get better news up front, and then in the next period or two, the good news tends to revise away, but they keep reporting good news. So it's ongoing good news, and the market only catch up to reality when they have a crash or something unfortunate like that. You do get wild swings in the markets. It's like a casino. Things are extraordinarily unstable, vulnerable. You could see extreme volatility here. We saw some extreme volatility today in some areas in response to this spurious report. I'll contend this is not an environment to be out there taking all your capital and playing in the market hoping to make a killing. This is an environment where everything you have that's denominated in dollars is at risk. It's a time to take action to batten down the hatches, look to preserve wealth and assets.
Bulk of the responsibility for the problems of this country are due to the irresponsible activity of the Fed under Alan Greenspan and all the money they printed. So they actually, last winter, when they printed even more money and all the things they've done, was fairly predictable, and that's what's lifted stock prices. But now we're going to have a whole host of problems down the road with a weak dollar, and one of these, and then at some point rates are going to go up because of the massive deficits we've created. So it's going to get a lot trickier next year and a little farther out.
First of all, I mean, we now have a news report out at the Atlantic, which I broke. The guys inside of Bear Stearns were misleading the raters about the information before they even rated the bonds. And I simply don't see how Timothy Geithner, as the head of the New York Fed, who was monitoring Bear Stearns and J.P. Morgan, wasn't quite aware of the quality of the collateral that was going into these bonds. More importantly, I don't understand why J.P. Morgan, who's supposedly in this deal, didn't pick any of the collateral that Maiden Lane and the Fed and the Treasury that we all know, that we own now as taxpayers. I don't see how they didn't know that they were junk. They were Bear Stearns' transfer agent. They reviewed their collateral like for years ahead of time. They knew exactly what they were doing. And it's a fraud on all of us. It's even more disgusting that Geithner and Bernanke, when it testified that they knew this would be investment grade, and I think at one point they tried to say that we're going to get $200 million off this investment by 2020. Well, I don't want $200 million in 10 years. We've already lost $1.3 billion on the assets in a year and a half.
This is typical of what goes on in government and banking more and more. People make deals, under-the-table deals, or behind-closed-doors deals, and they don't want anything in writing so they can deny it, so they can say that's not true. They can say, oh, it's just a conspiracy theory, and all of that sort of thing. In other words, we do not have a transparent government, and certainly when it relates to banking, we don't have any transparency at all. Everything is a non-disclosable event. And that becomes important a year or so later when these banks and the Treasury Secretary are telling the American people that everything has worked out just fine. The banks are paying back their loans. General Motors is paying back its loans. They're floating stock and so forth, and they're selling stock, and the old free enterprise capitalist system is kicking in, and isn't it a good thing we did this? And you know what? That's all just smoke and mirrors. Can I prove it? No, because it's a non-disclosable event, you see. There's nothing in writing, but we know just by looking at the balance sheets of these corporations and these banks, they are not making enough money, enough profit to pay back those huge, huge bailouts. They just aren't making it. In fact, in most cases, they're continuing to dip into the muck. So where's the money coming from? Well, in my view, it's a non-disclosable event. The money is coming from a deal, a promise made by the Federal Reserve System to these banks and corporations that they will provide the money. In other words, they will make new loans or new bailouts off the record that nobody knows about in order for them to publicly pay off the old bailouts and make them all look good. And that, in a nutshell, is the game that's being played as we speak.
Sending to you. It isn't the love of a hero, and that's why I fear it won't do. And they say
the idea that we've spent billions and billions of dollars, and in the UK you've spent billions and billions of pounds, turning once liberty-loving countries into nothing more than police states, is absolutely disgusting to me, especially when you look at some of the numbers. The numbers of people who've died in terrorist attack in the last decade is less than 30,000. The number of people who die every year in this country from lung cancer is nearly 200,000. Where is the war on lung cancer? Where is the war on drunk driving? Where's the war on accidental drowning? These are the kind of numbers that equate to terrorist attack. Yet these things don't create massive amounts of profit for the military-industrial complex.
they're watching us as we are alive.